Hi everyone, my name is Phil and welcome to PhilDoes3D. I'm a multimedia and 3D artist and I stream on Twitch weekdays from 5 p.m. Pacific time in the US. That will be 4 p.m. now that Daylight Savings is finished for you guys in the US. 11 a.m. in Australia and 12 a.m. in the UK. Let's jump into Max and open up the file we were working on yesterday, which is our garden terrace. Hope you guys are well. Remember, if you've got any questions, anything you want to ask me, feel free to pop into chat. Just want to pop in and say hello, that's cool. It's always good chatting with you guys. Yesterday we were finishing up the lower part of the garden terrace, the front stair section. So we'll just quickly finish that bit off today. I think we were working on this column here, and we've just got to copy it to this side of the model. We don't have to retexture it because the column being square, we can rotate it to hide the fact that we're using the same texture. So I'll just jump into the top viewport. We'll scroll in. I'm going to just move the pivot to the middle of the object just by saying effect pivot only and send it to object. It just makes it easier for me to rotate it and move it around. So I'm going to hold the shift key down and drag a copy over. Okay. We'll call this B column. I want to call it B column right, but there's already a column called that, I think. So I'm just going to quickly rename the old one. It's not, it's called a group, so that's fine. We have this problem again though with the texture mapping not copying across because we copied the model. So again, we'll fix that really easily by selecting the original model, going into our utilities tab and channel info. We will copy UV channel map 1, select our copied model and paste the UVs into the model. It's the same model, so it'll accept it without a problem. Okay, now we're going to call it B column right. I'm just going to pop into the top viewport and move it into position. Just pull it in a little bit more. There we go. I'm going to select the old column and delete it. And I'm going to rotate this column so that you can't see that it's a copy of the previous texture. So I'm just going to rotate it by 180 degrees. And now you won't notice that we're using the same texture because it's we're looking at the opposite side of the column here. So aside from that, I think we've just about finished up this lower front section of the model. We finished our borders here on either side. We put some dirt on the lower tiles around the edges here. In there. We fixed our stairs not going all the way to the edge. We textured up all of the columns. I want to add a bit more interest to these spheres sitting on top of these columns. So what I think I'll do is I'm going to render this out to a texture because I've noticed looking at this, we're getting texture stretching happening here at the very top, and I want to fix that up quickly in Mari. So what I'm going to do is we're going to a modify tab. We'll throw an unwrap UVW on. We'll use UV channel map channel 2. We'll move the UVs across. Open our UV editor. We'll select all of our UVs and we'll go mapping flatten mapping. The default values are fine. Okay. We'll deselect our UVs. I'm also going to turn off map seams and peel seams. We'll go to render, render to texture. We're going to use existing channel 2, which is the one we just created. We will add a diffuse map. I think 512 is probably big enough for these spheres as far as our texture size goes. We're going to save into our rework folder that we were working with yesterday. We're just going to call this one sphere. I'll call it sphere deco so I know what I'm doing. We're saving it as a .tga type of file, and 24-bit is fine. We don't need any alpha information. Okay, so we have our map channel, our diffuse map, our path, and our texture size. I'm just going to render that out. Turn that off. Alright, we can close those down. We'll go into Material Browser. We'll create a new shader, a bitmap. We'll go back into our rework folder. Sphere Deco was the one we just rendered out. I'm going to pipe that into a diffuse color. Turn on shaded material and turn on realistic material. And I'm going to assign the material to the model. Go into our Utilities tab, Channel Info. We're going to copy our map UVs from channel 2 into channel 1. We're going to clear out channel 2. We'll make sure our object is selected, and we're going to go File, Export, Export Selected. Again, we'll export it to our rework folder. We're going to be saving it as an OBJ file. I'm going to call it Sphere Deco. Yes. Okay. Let's quickly jump into Mari. Create a new project. Calling it Sphere Deco. I'm just going to change my path here, my temporary directory path. We're going to open up the OBJ we just exported. So rework folder, and it's Sphere Deco, that one there. We're going to create a color map at 512. Press OK. I'm just going to turn flat shading on so we can get a better look at our textured model. We're going to import into our layer stack the render to texture that we just created in Max. So again, F, stairs, rework. Again, it defaults to TIFF, so just pop star in there and you'll see everything in your directory. We want spheredeco.tga. If you can work in TGA, work in TIFF if you prefer than TGA. I prefer TGA personally, but it's just a personal preference thing. TIFF files are perfectly fine as well. They're just a little larger than TGA files. Okay, so now we're seeing that stretching that's happening here on the top of the sphere that I want to fix up. So I'm just going to double check our up and down values by jumping back into 3D Studio Max. I'm just going to isolate that sphere for a second. And okay, so the bottom is that has that bit of the texture there. I know which way is up now. So I'm just going to end isolate, jump back into Mari. So that's the bottom of the sphere. We don't worry about that. We're more concerned with the top of the sphere just here. So I'm just going to angle the model up. So we're looking more or less directly down on it to try to fix up this bit of the texture here where it's all pinching into the middle. I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to go into my image manager and load up some texture maps. Textures, aged and stressed, maps high. I think the best way to fix that pinching problem will be to paint in a dirt map, because I'd like a bit of interest on these anyway, so I think a bit of a dirt map here would look interesting. I'm just waiting for those to load up. Nearly there. Okay, let's have a look here. It's an interesting alpha we can use for a dirt map. I'm just actually going to bring in another directory as well, which is dirt and graffiti. I tend to use these quite a bit. And again, as I was saying yesterday, you want to keep your texture maps consistent. If you're working on the one model like I am with this garden terrace, you don't want to mix and match too much. You want to keep all of the dirt, the look of the dirt on the model consistent between all of the different sections of the model. So it's always better to use the same type of texture maps that you've been working on for everything. You don't always have to, and it's not always the case, but for this particular model, I would suggest sticking to the same sets of texture maps that you've been working with all along. Just, as I said, to keep it looking consistent. Okay. Now let's see here. What's this one like? No, that's not really what I'm after. What about this one? No, not that one either. I'll know it when I see it. No. No. Well, this one might work for us. Just going to see if it's anything a little better than that though. If not, we'll use this one here. Actually, I think this one will... maybe this one. No, not that one. I think we'll go back to the one that we had just here. I'm just going to scale it up. We're working on a new layer. I'm going to paint that in. I'm just going around the outside here first so I can get a feel for where the edges of the texture are. I'm not going to run that one down there. I'm going to finish it up there, I think, like that. And then paint in the center. Something like that. Going to hit the Alt key to bake that down. And I'm just going to move that texture out of the way for a moment. And we're going to work with our layer styles here. I'm going to put an adjustment stack of an invert on, I think. We'll see what that looks like. It's not really giving me the look that I'm after. It's not too bad. I'm just going to also throw in another layer. Look for another texture that's just a little bit different. Let me just pull that texture up so I can see what it is. And scale it back a bit. Well, it might work. Just going to paint that in here. Now again, we're working on another layer again. We're not working on the same layer as the texture we just put in. Just going to bake that down. I'm going to stay in this layer and grab another texture. Yeah, that should work okay. Just going to rotate the model around a little and work on a different side. So maybe here. Rotate that around a little. I'm just going to paint those in here. Again, I'm not using the entire texture. I'm just cherry picking the parts of the underlying texture map here that I want. I'll bake that down. And maybe one more. Let's see what you look like. No. It's a bit too heavy, that one. What about you? Yeah, this one should work okay. I'm just going to scale the texture down. Rotate it around a little. I'm also going to rotate the model. Maybe around here. And we'll paint that one in here. Like that. I'm just going to bake that down. I'll move our texture out of the way for a moment. Again, I think I might put an invert on this. So an adjustment stack and invert. And we'll play with our layers here. Alright. I'm going to remove the adjustment stack that we just put on. So I'm removing the invert, and I think we might use an add. I'm just going to pull it back a little bit. Maybe something like that. Alright, let's export that out and bring it back into Max. So export flattened, export everything flattened. Again, we're in our rework folder. I'm just going to star that so we can see our original name, which was spheredeco.tga. And we're going to call this one underscore painted.tga. You have to type in the .tga or .jpeg or .tip in Mari to tell it what format you want to export it as. There is no setting like in a lot of programs where you say I want a TGA, there's a drop down menu. You have to actually tell it in the file name. That confuses a few people at first. Okay, let's jump back into Max. We'll open up our material editor and we're going to load up our painted texture, which is this one here. Okay. It just adds, it hides that pinching that we had at the top and adds a bit more interest to the sphere itself. I'm actually going to create one more version of that because I have 4 of these spheres. So I'm going to jump back into Mari and save our project. I'm going to throw on a new layer. I'm going to grab another texture. No, that's not really right. Maybe. No, not that one. Maybe this one. Yeah, that'll probably work okay. Just going to scale it down a bit. Again, now I'm working on a new layer. I'm just going to angle our model up a little. I'm going to rotate it around a little as well. And I'm going to paint that in here. Like that. Bake that down. I'm also going to come around to this side and do the same thing again, but I won't be using the entire texture. I'm just cutting it off at the top here. Just using parts of it. This bit here and this bit down here. I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to take the bits at the top. I'm going to bake that down. We'll move our texture out of the way. I think I might do an invert on this layer. Let's see. Adjustment stack. Invert. Yep. I'm also just going to pull it back just a little. Okay. And we're going to export that one out as well. And we're just going to call this sphere Deco painted and underscore R2 for revision 2. I'll save our file quickly. Okay, let's jump back into Max. Now, we're calling this one Sphere Deco. What are we calling these? That's Sphere 2, alright. I'm going to jump into our top viewport here, select our original sphere, and again I'm going to copy it over. Just going to make sure I'm lined up here. Yep. Now I'm going to select our sphere 2, which is the one we're replacing it with. And again, we have our texture problem. So I'm just going to select the original sphere, go into our channel info and copy map channel 1, select our copied sphere and paste it in. Okay, I'm going to jump into our material editor, create a new material, which is the second copy of that painted sphere that we just exported from Mari, which would be this one here, the R2. Okay, I'm going to pipe that into the diffuse channel and turn on show material and show realistic. And I'm going to assign it to that sphere that we just copied. And that's just to make each one look a little different from the one before it, so the textures aren't exactly the same. We're going to do the same thing up here, but we're going to alternate them. So I'm going to take this sphere, jump back into the top viewport, hold down the shift key and drag and copy up to here. Again, I'm just going to make sure I'm lined up properly. And this is actually higher than the bottom sphere, so I'm also going to have to pull it up. So we'll jump into our front viewport here. And I'll pull that up into position, like that. That's sphere Deco 2. Okay, I'm going to delete the original, open up and paste our UVs back into UV channel 1. And I'm also going to rotate that sphere around a bit, like that. Okay. And again, we're going to do the same on the other side, but I'm going to use this sphere. So the sphere from this side was moved over here, the sphere from this side will be moved over here. I'll jump back into the top viewport. We'll hold down the shift key and drag a copy over. Again, we'll move it into position. And we'll move it up. I'll jump into my front viewport here. Over just a little bit. That's sphere Deco 3. We'll delete that sphere 4, select that, and copy, paste our UVs back into that copy we just made. And again, we're going to rotate it, so we'll rotate it around like that. Alright. So now we've fixed up the stretching on those spheres that was the pinching really that was happening on the top of the sphere. I'm just wondering whether we should add a little bit more interest. So I'm going to isolate one of our urns here, one of our lights I should say. I think I've grouped this, so I'm just going to open up the group, not ungroup it. Select that. I'm going to hold the shift key down again and drag out a copy. I'm going to detach that copy from the group. I'm going to close that group up again until we're ready to work on the light a little bit more. I don't think that's grouped. No, that's one object, so that's good. We're going to call this one Metal Sphere Deco. We'll call this one Metal Sphere Deco. I'm going to end our isolation mode. I've just realized something actually. Going to jump back into isolation mode really quick. Open that group again. I didn't select that those rings when I made the copy, so I think the easiest thing to do will be to just going to copy that name really quickly and delete that object. Now I'm going to select that and that, which is what I should have done before. Hold down the shift key, drag it over, make a copy, go into group and detach it from the original group. Select the original group and close the group. I'm going to rename our metal deco again and exit isolation mode. Okay, let's jump into the top viewport, and I'm going to move that over a little, then we'll scale it up. Just like that. So it's just around the outside edge of that sphere. I'm going to pull it down. And let's see what it looks like if we scale it up a little bit more. I'm just going to deselect that really quickly. I don't really like the look of that. I think it looks a bit too, I don't know, wrong. So we won't do that for the moment. I'll have a think about how we can add a bit more interest to that sphere in just a second, I think. Okay, let me just isolate this again and open our group. Maybe this would be more interesting. Let's pull out a copy of this one. Again, we'll detach it. Select our original group and close that group. Again, I'll call it Metal Sphere Deco, and we will end our isolation mode. I'm going to jump into the top viewport, and we'll move that down. Again, we'll scale it up a bit. We'll move it down. I'm just going to deselect it so we can get a better view of it. I'm just going to scale it up a little bit because it looks like it's intersecting on the sphere itself, which is, we don't want to do that to happen. It could be interesting. Let me just select our sphere and zoom into it. I'm just trying to gauge whether I like the look of it or not. For the moment, we'll leave it there. I'll copy it over to the other three spheres, and we'll wait till we get a bit more of the rest of the model finished and come back and decide whether we like it or not. I actually copied the wrong object then. I want to make sure I select our metal sphere deco, not the sphere itself. Okay. I'm just moving it into position. Double check that. Again, I'm working in the top viewport, just makes it easier to see where you're moving stuff to. I'm going to copy another one up here. We'll line it up. And we're going to move it up. And one more copy over to the left hand side. Again, we'll line it up. Double check it in the 3D viewport. That doesn't look too bad. Let's just deselect it and check our model. Okay. I think I might just make a quick save there. Now I want to do some work on that center section, that round section, and at the top of the terrace now, I think. I remember a few weeks ago I was talking about how I thought once we textured the model up a bit more, whether it would have needed a little bit more interest up on top. And now that we've got the model starting to come together, we've still got a lot of the texturing, all the texturing to do on the columns and the banisters here, but I still think it's probably going to need a little bit more interest in this middle section. So